Hello to all of our guests today and to our live audience all over the world, and welcome to our exclusive BNN live event in collaboration with World Mizrahi. And on today's episode, Charities on the Front Line, we are joined by the incredible Nomi Nussbaum, the Executive Director of One Family US. Thank you for joining us today, Nomi.
Thank you so much for having me.
And let's start by introducing Nomi and the One Family organization. One Family is Israel's leading organization supporting victims of terror and their families, and it provides critical short and long-term emotional, financial, rehabilitative assistance to those impacted by terrorism. One Family was established 23 years ago in response to the Second Intifada, and it lives up to the slogan of the power of together. By building communities based on shared experiences, One Family helps bereaved families and survivors overcome unspeakable grief and pain and helps them to reintegrate into Israeli society. Our special guest, Nomi Nussbaum, is the Executive Director of One Family, a position that she has held for over 5 years. She joined the One Family organization after a 20-year career in special education, and according to Nomi, the field of special education explains that each student needs an individual plan for education, and healing from trauma is exactly the same way at One Family, the organization that she now heads up. So One Family has adapted very quickly to the dynamic reality of wartime. They have grown their staff and are managing a deluge of interested volunteers. They have mobilized and are working hard to gain the trust of thousands of people at the most vulnerable time. Thank you, Nomi, for joining us today. Thank you to all our guests who are here live with us. And I think we can begin with one of the main questions that people might be wondering who aren't familiar with One Family. Nomi, please tell us about One Family and about the charity's mission for families of victims of terror.
Oh, thank you so much. One Family is an organization that wants to help every victim of terror in Israel. We hope we can grow that large to reach them all. We provide predominantly emotional support services. We also provide legal and financial and practical assistance. We help victims of terror get the government benefits that they're entitled to, and then we fill in all the gaps. So whatever they need, we are here for them. Every family has a different particular situation. Each member of the family needs something different. And we provide individual assistance. Every plan is going to be unique.
We'll talk about the different plans that you've come across in your line of work, but let's try and paint a picture of these last 9 months as a charity on the front line here in Israel within the kind of non-profit world and assisting these families. So before October the 7th, One Family were the leading organization treating victims of terror. You guys are experts in the field. And then we were hit with October the 7th, which tore the nation apart. And One Family were put at the forefront. And I know there's lots of numbers and stats of actually how many victims, families of victims of terror you guys are having to treat and assist. And there is a story that I know you would like to tell of the way that you had to mobilize in those first few days. An emergency call center was set up with just 20 volunteers, with shiva requests, funeral requests, food requests. If you could just talk to me about the first week of October the 7th and how One Family had to mobilize at this time.
Sure. The regular programming that we have in place was not going to, we needed to enhance that for October 7th. There were a few changes, right? So the first thing was literally that night we established a 24-hour call center, like an emergency phone number, and we had 20 volunteers sitting around a table answering calls that came in from all over the country. People weren't evacuated yet, or not formally evacuated. They didn't have hotel reservations. But that first week, people didn't have food, clothing, water, shelter, toothbrushes, blankets. So we had hundreds of volunteers baking, making packages, and delivering to all corners of the country. And we had these volunteers sitting around a table answering the calls that came to the center. So we knew about the food and the basic necessities, but some of the frantic calls, were like, I can't find my relative. Can you help me? And it's like calling all the hospitals to see if somebody has seen this person. When the government started formally evacuating everybody and sending them to the hotels, everybody in a community would receive a phone call with a specific hotel reservation. They were told where to go, when to go, and then they were off. So somebody called and said, I'm the only person in my community who didn't receive a phone call. And she tried calling social services and couldn't get through, and she desperately needed help. So for 2 days, somebody was calling on her behalf, and we got her a reservation, and she went. Somebody else showed up at the hotel where they were told to go, except that hotel had never heard of that person, and there were no rooms left, no beds left. So what does that person do, right? That was another call that we fielded. A third woman who we knew has 6 children, 3 of whom are on the autism spectrum. And everybody right up until her home was evacuated, she was just on the other side, just, a few feet away from the people who were evacuated, and the government was not evacuating her block. But her 3 children only had 15 seconds to run to the shelter, and they can't do that. And when they're playing in their backyard, it might be fenced in and safe for them to walk around and play. But, getting 6 kids, 3 of whom have autism, to run for 15 seconds into a shelter is not a possibility. Also, the sirens are devastating. They're so traumatic for young kids. So she needed a new place to live, and the government wasn't going to give her one, right? So those were some of the calls that stand out. But we know that, everybody in the South needed to be relocated. Nobody had food, shelter, clothing. So there was a lot. And we went to the hotels in the beginning. We brought iPads for kids. There was no school. A few little kids had birthday parties, right? We brought them balloons and a cake and a little gift because, they're in a hotel. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do, no school. Half their friends or relatives are missing, or, there was a lot of traumatic moments there. So that was, a very big shift that happened right away. Another big shift was that before October 7th, when there was a terror attack, there was a short list of people that we could track down and we can go find them. We could assign them, our staff to call, to visit, to go, to see what they need. Now, the devastation was so wide. Like, one of the biggest pivots that we also had to make was, instead of us calling each individual and saying, hey, come to our support group, let us help you, meet some people, we now have events in a city over here, in a city over here, in a city over here. And we'll say, if you're a bereaved parent, a newly bereaved parent from the South, please come to this event at this time. If you're a new widow from Jerusalem, please come to this event at this time. If you live in Tel Aviv and you're a bereaved sibling, we're going to have an event for you here. Please come. So now we're publicizing events to the public broadly, and it's like an open invitation for everyone who can drive or take a bus. Please come to this event, which is very different than personal invitations from before. But that was one of the ways that we had to scale and reach everybody.
And I just want to say that the way in which you guys have had to scale is staggering, because there is an increased demand, which is why we are wanting to highlight your work in this event today with our students from World Mizrahi who are tuned in now, to encourage them to get involved, which we'll talk about, and to continue to support these charities in whatever way they can. But let's talk about what people aren't really talking about now, which is that the charities like One Family and your team are still on the front line now, because the terror attacks have not stopped. There are funerals each day. There is continued support for widows, widowers, orphans, families who are experiencing immense pain and grief. And One Family has to continue going round the clock, non-stop. And something that you guys do are, you offer support groups, you offer activity days, which is something that we've just discussed. Tell me some of the support that is on hand for these families, what One Family actually provide them throughout this period of time.
Okay, so there's like immediate, does someone need help planning a funeral? Does somebody need some kind of support in the hospital? Sometimes a soldier is severely wounded and the mom is there helping the husband or the father, right? But then there are children at home, and who's going to watch the children? So we really take into account the whole picture when we go to try to help somebody. But there's immediate support when we, rush in the beginning, and then long-term support, which is the weekly or bi-weekly support groups for children. There's a youth department all year round, with many different tiers of support. They're assigned, like, everybody is assigned like a professional friend, kind of, who calls every week, who visits every week. The kids in the camp have these camp counselors that keep in touch with them, or they might have a big brother or big sister who takes them out every single week and mentors them, helps them with homework. They do some fun activities to really give them support throughout the year. And then we have therapeutic camps for young victims 3 times per year, during Chol Hamoed Pesach, for a week during the summer, and then usually Hanukkah time. This week, this is horrible, right? Kids look forward to coming to this summer camp all year round. In the United States, it's standard that almost everybody goes to camp every summer. In Israel, not the case at all. So this camp, not only is it a treat for them, also it's therapeutic, and it's with friends who are the same as them. They're not the weird ones standing out with the story. They fit right in with their peers. So this year, the camp was planned far in advance to be up north, away from the war in the south. And as you well know, the tension in the north got so bad that we had to relocate the camp just a few days before, because of the barrage of rockets that came to the north of the Kinneret and then to the west of the Kinneret. The camp was supposed to be right in that area and not safe. So just right before, and it's this week. So right before it started, we, at the last minute, had to change the location and cut it in half. Our youth department usually accommodates 200 or 200, I think 200 or 250 children per camp. This year we were having between 450 and 500 people. So we had to make special accommodations to have them in different locations. And then it was changed right at the last minute. And sadly, you heard, right? So the camp is going on now. Sadly, you heard that mother and father were murdered in their car. And now there's 3 new orphans, right? As of yesterday or the day before. I just got back from Israel, so I don't know what day it is anymore, but that's tragic, right? And we just had a retreat for orphans from October 7th, like a 2-week retreat in Mexico just a couple of weeks ago. And here we're already welcoming in. Very, very hard to work on PTSD when the hits just keep on coming, right? This is an active war zone, so really hard to move forward, right? The wound is opened up every time you turn on the news in Israel.
I think what you said, an active war zone, is such a huge part of one family's mission since October the 7th, because it doesn't end. But there is some incredible light that you guys provide, and you just spoke about the retreat in Mexico, where you had bereaved family members who are going through such immense pain and trauma. There's a lot of tension on widowers and widows whose lives have been completely torn apart. Can you just walk me through like the retreats? And summer camp is something that across the diaspora is a huge gift and a huge luxury to a lot of people, but it's also taken for granted. It's something every summer they're going to go on camp, and I'm sure a lot of our World Mizrahi students will relate to that experience. Can you tell me the types of families, why they're coming on these retreats and what they're taking away at the end of the retreats?
The retreats are, for the adults, right? The camp, a sleepaway camp for a week, is for the children, right? And the camp is filled with all kinds of fun. But whether it's a retreat or a camp, it's filled with therapeutic activities and people who are in similar situations and similar pain. And it's designed that way on purpose. That's part of the secret sauce, to get people in a group of peers where it's normal to be struggling with this situation and these types of feelings, because there's a wide range of feelings, and nobody is going to see you, really deeply, truly see you better than somebody who is in your shoes or has been in your shoes. We also, on the retreat, send somebody, if we're taking bereaved parents from the South to Cyprus for a 4-day, 3-night therapeutic retreat, we want everybody there to be a bereaved parent. We also will send 1 or 2 couples who were bereaved parents 5, 10, 15 years ago to show the newly bereaved people that there is a path forward. You can rebuild a life. And there are psychologists and volunteers. The retreats are in a beautiful, safe setting. There's no rocket alerts going off there. There's natural springs. There's bodies of water. We have, yoga and meditation sessions. We can have a little bit of group therapy. We have some music with deliberate lyrics, right? We have a rabbi who's writing a Sefer Torah, and the parents get to choose letters that are significant for their name or for their child for some reason, so that their memory should live on and their neshama should have an aliyah. So therapeutic and healing, and then that retreat gives them a new peer support group, right? New friends who are just like them that they will be in contact with when they go back home. And we will start weekly or bi-weekly groups for that group of people who went away together. And the retreat is a way that they will, like the opening, so that they know one family really means to help them, that we're trustworthy, and that we're in this for the long haul. It's not that we're going to come and visit you in the hospital or come to the Shiva call and then we're gone. The opposite. We're rushing to the funerals and the hospital rooms, and we're going to stay with you as long as you need us. You're welcome to come to these support groups for the rest of your life. And we hope that, each victim will make really good friends, so that there's like a good domino effect outside of our walls that will help them get through their lives and their journey with grief and hopefully coming back to life.
You mentioned about the long term, that one family isn't just there for the period of a shiva or for the period of, just a month. They're in it for the long term, and to assist with all things ranging from PTSD to even just an emotional support group each week, which is a lot for one family to provide, because that's round the clock. Just talk to me about the long term, the way that one family has to be there 365 days of the year for many years. And I know that you have people that are on your staff who came from one family and who are families of victims of terror. And any stories that you'd like to share with me, Nomi, along the way, of people that you've met who have been in it for the long term, feel free to do so as well.
Sure. I was in Israel this week, and I walked in and I recognized a woman who was a terror victim. She lost her husband 6.5 years ago, and they had 6 children together. So she's a widow, and she was in the one family building. Hey, great to see you. What are you doing here? It's like, I got a job here 2 months ago. She knew on October 7th, it was her job to help the other new widows. She had to. And I said, how did this happen? And she said, well, when I lost my husband, one family became my family. They knew exactly what to say to me and how to say it so that I would listen, because grief can kind of pull you into a very dark, lonely, isolated place. It has a way of doing that. And she said that the people at one family really knew how to pull her out of it, and she loved it. What one family gave her, right? The professionals, but also the support group and the peers. And as soon as October 7th happened, she started volunteering for us, and she's amazing at what she does. She says that actually makes her stronger to be able to help the new widows. And we hired her and gave her a job 2 months ago. She does the training, with everybody else, and she can help new widows through their bereavement, their grief, their devastation, their trauma better than anyone else, because she was there. So she's like a role model who knows what to say with the training, and who more perfect for that job. That is so inspiring to me, to watch her walking around with a big smile on her face. And then I said, tell me about the widows, and then I hear that we created separate support groups. And she's describing this to me. She said, well, one support group for widows is for the mothers who are now raising children on their own. And some of these women are very young, right? Some women just got married and they're just having babies and they don't have enough time to really grieve. They just lost their soulmate and they're raising young children. Other widows, like 50 and over, have their own group because their kids might be grown and out of the house and they just lost their husband and they're truly alone and devastated by that loneliness. And then there's another group of widows who got married and weren't married long enough to have children. And they're so bitter that they lost, that opportunity was taken away. They lost their husband and they lost their children, they feel like. And then I was even surprised to learn that we have a separate support group, young women who were engaged to soldiers and they were murdered. They never even got to their wedding, right? And so to think about engaged people, they're not even they're not like on the radar as being a typical group that needs support, but it makes obvious sense. Of course they do. They found the love of their life. They just never made it to the chuppah. So they don't actually sit Shiva, but boy, are they grieving just like everybody else. So I found this really inspiring, really, really inspiring that they're getting the help, that they're having new friends, and they're finding a path to move forward. I went to visit somebody in the South on Tuesday, and this is a mother of 9 children whose husband was murdered as he was walking to shul on October 7th, very early. He was the first person in Ofakim killed. And their Shomer Shabbat, they had no idea that he was killed. They don't use phone. They have a kosher phone and they weren't looking at it in the first place. So they were really detached and they had no idea what was going on that morning. And so when the sirens stopped, because apparently the sirens took a break a few hours later, this mother took her daughter to shul around 9. There were no sirens. And they brought candy to throw candy because it was Simchat Torah. And the daughter, maybe a siren went off again. Firstly, they already knew that the husband was not at shul, and they didn't know why, because he had left hours before to go to shul. And the daughter got scared. She's 7 or 8 years old. And the mom said, do not be scared. Even if you run and hide from the rocket, Hashem knows the address. If it's your time, it's from him. Don't be scared. And when I heard that story, and I'm sitting in this woman's house and I'm meeting her friends and I'm seeing she's a beautiful home. She's smiling. They bake fresh foods. They put out heart-shaped chocolates. Like, that story was so powerful. I knew this widow is far stronger than I am. And that kind of faith was so inspiring. That's truly in my heart. And I took a yahrzeit candle that they had specially made for her husband, with his picture on it. And I brought it home and I put it with my Shabbat candles so that when I light candles every week, it will definitely be for his neshama to have an aliyah. But really, I got much more out of that visit than I gave, truly.
You've just returned from such an impactful trip where that's only just one of the stories that you've seen of people who are directly impacted and involved with one family. And you guys are really there to provide that support. I know that one of the main missions of One Family is to support on the emotional side. And there's a big conversation in the Jewish community about PTSD and about kind of the mental health aspect of all of this. What kind of services do One Family provide when it comes to PTSD and emotional support? Do you guys have therapists in the company? Explain to me a little bit about that, because I know that's very interesting to some of our viewers.
Sure. Well, you also know that they're rewriting the textbooks on PTSD based on October 7th, right? This is unprecedented type of trauma. Okay. One Family has tiered support. We have psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, we have bubbies, we have trauma-informed counselors. And we have peer counselors, right? Those big brothers and big sisters that I was telling you about a little bit earlier, they are about college age kids in Israel who go for training, a very specific training course, and then they're with their younger peer. So the unique aspect to what goes on in one family is that everybody needs something different, right? Maybe somebody is good with the support groups. Maybe someone needs private psychology. Maybe somebody needs a psychiatrist. So we will provide all of that. We also have a wide range of other, therapeutic modalities like EMDR, emotion aid, stellate ganglion blocks, deep tissue massage, hydrotherapy, drama therapy, phototherapy, sand, little for babies, sand therapy, play therapy, creative writing courses, art therapy. If something is going to heal somebody, we're going to do it. A victim came to us and said, there were so many victims, right? Moms who find out on Erev Shabbat when they're standing cooking in their kitchen that a child in the service fell. Some of them can never cook again, or they cannot cook their favorite foods, or it's hard to take care of the living children when they're grieving so much about the child that they lost. So after a while, one of the moms said, I think it would be really therapeutic if we get together and cook. Do you think we can pull this off together? And yes, and they made a cookbook out of all the favorite recipes of the child that they lost. And they told the story and they cooked the recipes and they eat together. And that's really therapeutic. Another father stopped singing when he lost his son. And, the wife said, you really should start singing again. And he lost the joy of life and he didn't want to sing. But there were other men who also had the same response. And now we have a group of fathers that gets together to sing, and they sing their fallen child's favorite songs, or songs that remember them. And they sing to protect the soldiers, right? Sing to the current soldiers, sing to protect them. So we are open to any type of therapeutic modality that will help somebody. And when they come with creative projects, we say, yes, let's do it.
That's incredible. And also something that it is so touching, the forms of different support that you guys give, whether it be through arts and music or whether it's through food. These are all things that assist in the process.
Yeah.
But there's something on the more logistical side of working at a charity or working and being a charity on the front line during in an active war zone. Let's call it how it is. There is a need for the company to grow in order to provide support. There are increased demands for one family in order for you guys to continue your work. And as northern Israel continues to have attacks every day from Hezbollah, and how we are continued to be worried about the northern front. How are you guys planning ahead? What are the increased demands? You guys almost have to be ready for the next phase. Talk to me about that.
Well, we're mobilizing a lot of volunteers, for sure. We are actively on social media. We're having events. We're trying to create more awareness, right, on social media. So I would ask everyone to please like us, follow us, share, to get the need out there. And for this particular audience, one family has, with Mizrahi, a huge Yom HaZikaron ceremony every year. So please come and join us, spread the word. It can be live streamed in people's shuls and schools all around the world. Families need help preparing for the Chagim. If any of these, if any of the college students want to come and help us that way, running the marathon with us, please, or pack mishloach manot when it's Purim time. So there are ways to come and help that college students can certainly take part of, and we would welcome them with open arms. So that would be wonderful.
How are you guys preparing internally within your staff, within one family? How are you guys preparing to continue these efforts as there are daily attacks in the north? There are at the moment 60,000 families from northern Israel who are still displaced and evacuated. Yeah. And there's kind of a question mark as to how we're going to continue. But one family can't just sit around and wait. You guys have to be mobilized. So yes. What are you guys doing in order to be prepared during these large-scale attacks in the north?
Well, we're scaling. We're hiring more people. we need more funding to hire more people. We're also doing more training, right? We just brought in another company to teach us about a brand new trauma protocol that was created across disciplines in Israel to help with the immediate shock of trauma in your body. We trained the entire staff. Shortly after October 7th, we were training internists in the top, state-of-the-art trauma protocol so that internists can do some psychological work when people come to the doctor. And we had training for doctors in Hebrew, in English, and in French, right? Like different sessions in different languages for whatever they needed. So we're enlisting volunteers and training them, right? Because the people who have been with us for many years really can get to a new victim in a deep place quickly and effectively to positively improve their trauma response, which is what we want. So thank God, people who have been with us for many years are coming. We're training them and going into the field with them. We're hiring new employees to expand as much as we can. We're helping doctors to treat more patients all around Israel. And we're creating as much awareness as we can for more funding so that we can scale farther.
Amazing. And that needs to continue, which is why we want to highlight One Family's work so that everyone can continue to support you guys. But there's a question of everyone asks about hope. And that word is a very difficult word in these kind of circumstances because there are families that have literally been torn apart who struggle to continue each day. But there are some stories that bring an immense amount of light. And I was just wondering, Nomi, if you had any stories from the One Family staff and volunteers about what has brought you the most light during the most incredibly tragic and difficult and challenging time.
I've seen a few widows who are so strong in their faith that they've made me stronger. Like I was just blown out of the water. Like anything going on in my life is nothing compared to them. And I feel like it's all okay because of how strong they are. I don't know how widows can find the strength to be happy and teach their children. In fact, the family that I told you I visited in the South on Tuesday, the children literally said, "We're strong because of our mother." And I feel like if the roles were reversed and I was in that position, maybe I would fall apart. But not only is that woman stronger and stronger for her 9 children, and I told you about Yael, the widow whose husband was murdered 6 years ago, who's now working. There are plenty of others, and so that gives me strength. And I'll tell you what else. There are 2 orphans who met through our orphan program that fell in love and got married and had children. There's another orphan, and her younger brother had a counselor, or big brother, a counselor, a mentor, who came to the house for visits like for years. And they ended up falling in love and getting married because he knew the family so well. So the devastation is real and it's hard. But everywhere you look, there are stories of miracles, and there are stories of volunteers, and there are stories of unwavering faith. And those have deeply changed my life and my perspective and made me so much happier.
I guess for you, this is such a unique role for you to do. You came from a background of special education. What makes you so passionate yourself about working somewhere like One Family and making such a deep impact on the lives of Israelis?
It was always about tikkun olam. I knew from the time I was a child, I wanted to make the world a better place. And in my first career, I really, truly tried to help my students have a better life. And I felt like I had the skills to make an impact. And here, seeing the unique way that One Family can help trauma victims improve their outcomes, that is just beautiful, touching, inspiring. I love it in every way. Sometimes when there's a traumatic incident, a death, a severe injury, there's like a ripple effect. There's a domino effect that's bad, right? One horrible thing happens, and then 5 more horrible things happen to everybody around. And One Family steps in and tries to stop it right there and put their lives back onto a good course, right? Bring somebody back who should never have been gone in the first place. And, I visit people, soldiers in the hospital without limbs or with all kinds of horrible injuries. So we can't bring back lives. We can't put their bodies back together, but we most certainly can give them the joy of life and some love and let them know that we're in this difficult spot together. Nobody is suffering alone. We're here together. And I feel like that makes all the difference. We put them back on the right track. And that's what's so meaningful for me. And that's why I love it.
I mean, it's truly amazing and remarkable, the work that you guys do. But there is the world kind of watching on, and life does go by, and people inevitably go about their daily lives. People who aren't affected directly or perhaps aren't so familiar with this world. And there might be some of our viewers who aren't familiar with this world. But the question is kind of, what does the world or young people need to know about families of victims of terror? What are the things that we don't know or that we should know, especially within the Jewish community where many of us have been directly impacted? What do people need to know about this?
What I would say is that we help the people on the news go on living long after the headlines fade. Even the worst of injuries are going to heal, but trauma does not heal on its own. It gets worse and worse and worse. And it can take a lifetime to overcome that. We hope it doesn't. We hope that it happens shorter. But the events that we hear on the news, we become accustomed to, and we think it's over when the news stories stop. And it doesn't. It gets worse, and it gets more involved and more complicated and more challenging. I think that's what people don't understand. A news headline is 3 people were killed today, right? But no, each of those people has how many first degree relatives and second degree relatives and jobs and finances and children, and it's so complicated, right? There could be 10 people that we have to help for every one life lost. So I think that's the part behind the news that most people don't know, that they really need to know. There are a lot of first degree relatives impacted by one loss, and trauma takes years and years and years to overcome. That's why what we're doing is so important and so complicated, and we need everybody's help. That's why we have to do this together.
Finally, I guess, for most of us, we probably will have never seen something like one of your main services that you provide, which are these incredible support groups, which are closed doors, exclusive. People are not allowed in because it is a private place where people can discuss their trauma. But that's something quite interesting, that people don't realize that these support groups continue going, and
Yes.
Weekly, twice a week, sometimes monthly. Can
Right.
you tell me why people, how you guys get people involved in the support groups, firstly, but also the importance of something as simple as a support group, which is
Right.
something that one family completely excel in? Just talk to us about the support groups specifically, because I know, you have the retreats and the summer camps, but the support groups are at the One Family HQ. It's something unique to you guys. So walk me through that.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, trauma makes you feel like you're suffering and you're alone, and you can't relate to the people in your life the way you used to before. So even the family dynamic, if a child is lost, somebody is doing their army service and he's lost, he has younger siblings who just lost like their best friend and that older sibling. And each parent is grieving, and the parents have trouble talking to each other. The kids feel like they're losing their parents because they can't take care of them the same way after they lost an older sibling, right? So the family dynamics are changed, and people don't relate to their friends outside the same way they did anymore. They feel like the unusual one with a painful story, and nobody wants to hear about it as time goes on, right? Shiva week is over, we're done, moving on. So these support groups give each victim a network of peers. Firstly, we have to attract them to come with food and drinks and fun activities, all kinds of activities, you name it, and we've done it. So we have to have something attractive to get them there, because it's hard to get people to want to talk about their pain. But once they're there and they're enjoying themselves, we have a psychologist running a group to talk them through new psychological tools that will really help them cope with their loss and with their trauma. And we know that the hole in their heart of that trauma is never going to heal, but we can teach them to support that hole in their heart and add joy back into their life. Add a little spark of happiness, a little bit of love, something to live for with new friends who are going through the exact same difficulty that they're going through, and they can all uplift each other, right? It's hard to learn that new tool, but if you have a new friend who's also working on that tools, when you're having a bad day, you can call that friend, and vice versa, right? Because it's not a straight road towards recovery. It's like a roller coaster, up and down. We all have our days. So the support network from the peers is truly a daily ongoing thing. And there are stories of people who have been friends for decades that are still supporting each other. And every support group is like this. There's going to be food and drinks, some kind of pampering, some kind of fun activity, some new therapeutic tool. And, we're adding a little bit of joy to bring them back into life. And hopefully it's a good domino effect, not the traumatic domino effect.
It's incredible because there's also another type of domino effect where you guys actually have these, I don't know how the term is that you guys use it, but the big sister or the role model or the big brother. And
Yes.
there are these role models within one family who, like your colleague, a staff member of one family, Yael, who lost her husband 6 years ago in a terror attack in Israel, has now returned to one family after receiving the support and is
Yeah.
now a role model. What kind of light and hope does this provide to the victims who are even in their shloshim or in their first year even of their grief, where they can see this person who's kind of in the next phase of life or overcome a hurdle?
It can make all the difference. It truly can. We use the term tiered support, right? Because there are psychologists running groups or designing the camp, but the camp is for everyone and everybody has the same counselor, right? But if they have a big brother and big sister, somebody's going to be speaking to them all year round. And especially for kids, sometimes they go off the derech or sometimes they're having specific trouble. We can bring in whatever specialist they need. So they'll have group support with their peers. They can have an older mentor to provide that path forward and that special attention. They can have adult professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, whatever they need. They can have play therapy if they need, or the sky is the limit. The activities, I've seen pictures of these kids on boats and rock climbing and zip lines and climbing through trees, therapeutic animals, right? So we give them all kinds of physical challenges and fun experiences to help them, but there's a whole tier of psychological support services that we offer that will give everybody what they need.
I want to open up to the chat box in a minute because we've got a few questions coming in from our viewers.
Sure.
But I just want to remind people that, as Nomi said a little earlier on, there are ways to get involved with one family, whether it's running a marathon, as you said, or getting involved directly through the website or through social media. You guys can log on to the One Family Instagram page or on their website and find out ways to get involved. And I just want to remind our viewers about that. But I'm going to open to a couple of questions, and we're going to touch on volunteering a bit for our last two questions. How do the volunteers keep going? How do they decide I can keep doing this? Because there's some people, they volunteer maybe twice and they feel like they can't continue going on. How do they continue going through their volunteer work with One Family?
So I actually asked the person who took me around the South on Tuesday that very question, because we went to house after house where the devastation was overwhelming to me, for sure. And I said, how do you do this? And she said, at night before I go to sleep, I think about all the people that I helped that day. And that's what gets me through it. What would have happened if she hadn't gone? And that fills her with so much love and strength that she has the koach to do it again the next day. She spends her day with people who are crying or who are dealing with the most challenging situations. She took me to visit a grandmother who just got back from the retreat in Mexico. The grandmother's son and daughter-in-law were murdered, and the 7-year-old granddaughter was, saw the murder of her parents, but left alive. And now this grandmother is actively helping to raise the granddaughter, along with her daughter, the bereaved sister of the boy that was killed, right? How do you process this kind of loss and this kind of change? And she says, who's going to help the little girl? Like, of course, the grandmother's going to do it, the aunt is going to do it, and this volunteer is going to keep going to make sure that they have what they need. They have the retreats, they have the support groups. She said that the widow that I visited says she's literally watching the clock. Every other week, there's a support group for widows in Ofakim. There's 14 of them. She cannot wait for that support group. So I think it's the feedback from the victims themselves that is so inspiring, that even the women or men or children, right, who are still crying and grieving and can't give it, she knows from the feedback of the ones who are now able to give feedback that it's life-changing and it's the most important thing in the world. And that's what keeps our volunteers going. We have volunteers, we have employees who give up their day off. Friday is their day off, to bake challah and bring it to the wounded soldiers every Friday. Just go visit them. Literally, they were working around the clock, and they gave up their Fridays, and they just decided this is what they're going to do. So many people need the help, and there's opportunity to give it.
And I think we've said so many times during this podcast event, round the clock. It really is round the clock, and it never stops for you guys, no matter where you are, whether it's the US office or the Israel office. It just continues. I have another question here.
Yeah.
What strategies do One Family use to help volunteers manage any emotional challenges that they might face whilst, supporting victims of terror, so that they can remain resilient in that volunteer role? Are the staff on hand to help the volunteers at any point? Just walk me through that if you can.
Okay, so I guess it depends what kind of volunteers, but the people that actually work there, even if they're volunteering there with a regular role, there's training, lots of training, right? Everyone needs to be trauma informed and know exactly how to help people walk through grief. And there are so many psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers around that if a volunteer needed to speak to somebody about a specific problem, there would certainly be somebody there to speak to. But we don't send people in blind. Like if somebody shows up and says, hey, I want to go to the hospital with you and visit some soldiers today, okay, it's one day. They're probably processing alone. But if somebody is working with One Family, even on a volunteer basis, there's infrastructure.
Amazing. And I guess for you, Nomi, being based in the States, and I know you've come to visit throughout this time, and you're heavily involved, and this is your job. But what are the kinds of things that you're seeing over in America? A lot of our students are from the States and are in yeshiva and seminary. What kind of volunteer programs are you seeing over in the States? Are people running these marathons? Are there bake sales? What's going on over in your community?
Oh, absolutely. I see people running marathons. I see people having fundraisers around every life milestone. Like, we just had a baby. We want to help another baby in Israel. How can we do a fundraiser, right? And we make them their own page. Birthdays, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, weddings. You can twin for any life event and for any athletic activity. And it's so beautiful, the outpouring of love. People call us all the time saying, can you help me make a fundraiser? I just want to help somebody. And it happens. Right before I flew to Israel, somebody from Australia called and said, my son is having a bar mitzvah in September. He like out of nowhere, he said, I really want to help a boy in Israel who's suffering, and maybe there's a boy who needs tefillin, or, is there something special that I can do for somebody? So I remembered, and literally my first morning there, I went to visit the hospital, wounded soldiers, and there was a mother there, a wife with children. Her oldest is about to have a bar mitzvah. The father or the husband is in critical condition, and she doesn't leave his bedside. she said she has to make a bar mitzvah in September. Her head's not there. It's going to have to be in the hospital so the husband can be present, and she needs help. And I'm like, oh my God, someone literally called me yesterday from Australia saying, I want to help somebody who has a special situation. This, and the other boy, his bar mitzvah was also in September. Like, it was star-crossed, 100% meant to be. And then I go home on with a smile on my face when things like that happen, and it happens more often than you would think.
It's really remarkable, like people's continued dedication to one family and choosing to get involved even 9 months on. What's your final message, Nomi, to people who haven't been involved with one family yet, want to get involved, maybe they're thinking how they might be able to? What's your kind of message to them emotionally to continue that volunteering effort, to continue supporting one family?
For this audience, I would say you have a beautiful year in Israel. Think about the holidays and the milestones that are going to happen, and consider helping a victim, right? One Family and World Mizrahi have that Yom HaZikaron ceremony, but don't wait until next April. Come for the Chagim. See who needs help. It will enhance your holiday to help somebody else have a special holiday, right? So thank you for the awareness. Thank you for thinking of others. Help in your own special way that will be meaningful to you, and it will also be meaningful to somebody else. You'll have a bond forever.
Beautiful words to end off this special event, Nomi. We really appreciate having Nomi Nussbaum with us today, representing one family all the way in the States, but representing both the American office and mainly the Israel office, and all the work that goes on with one family on the ground here to support families of victims of terror. And we do hope that all of our gap year SEM and yeshiva students who are tuned in today will continue their volunteering efforts and think about one family within that journey. And please do go to the One Family website and follow One Family on all of their social media, including Instagram, to find out about what they're doing. And you can see all the retreats on Instagram. You can see exactly what they're doing on their Instagram stories. Have a look. Let it get you inspired. And we thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Nomi.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.